Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Warren City School District Board of Education, a regular meeting, August 2nd, 2022, starting at 5:31 p.m. at Warren G. Harding High School's cafetorium with live stream available at warrencityschools.org. This is a meeting of the Warren City Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in Agenda Item 11. Mrs. Scartino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty?
Here.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Here.
Mrs. Patterson?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Present.
Mr. Fowler?
Present. Would you all please rise to salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will be adjourning to executive session for consideration of appointment, employment, promotion, etc. of public employees, conference with an attorney involving pending legal action, matters required to be kept confidential by state or federal law, and consideration of confidential information related to an economic development project.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Scartino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes, and the motion carries. We'll adjourn to the teachers' lounge.
Okay.
Everybody ready? Okay, Julian's.
Yes.
Frank, are we on?
Go for it.
Thank you. Item 4 on page 2, communications, Mr. Shiro.
I have three brief communications for the board this evening. First communication is you will find in your packets in your areas today the annual report and calendar that goes out to families within the community. Those came back just in the last couple of days. You get the first preview of that, so please look at that. It's taken a lot of hours for our department to put that together, and I think it's another fine production and features not only the annual report of the business of the board in the district, but also features our kids and our students across the district. So take a moment to enjoy that. The second communication this evening is also with you is the postcard that'll be going out to families, and this is in regards to our back to school celebration. We will once again be having that on Wednesday, August 17th on Courthouse Square, starting at 11:30 a.m. So if you could join us, you know, usually we have about 1,000 folks down there. Our schools will be well represented as well as our community. It's a good time. We'll have our football players, representation from our band, our cheerleaders, as well as hundreds of staff, students, and their families. So again, that's on the 17th at 11:30 a.m. on Courthouse Square. And the last thing I wanted to reference is an email that I sent out to all district employees at the recommendation of local health officials that because Trumbull County is in a period of high transmission with COVID-19, that it is recommended proper mask wearing indoors, especially when individuals are not able to be socially distanced. So that communication went out at the recommendation of local health officials. Again, that's a recommendation only. If you have any questions, please let me know. And that concludes the communications this evening.
Thank you. I would like to adopt a consent agenda, which means we follow the agenda, save for item 4 on page 17, which I request that the board moves between the superintendent's report and the Board of Education committee reports. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion passes. Thank you very much. Treasurer's report, Mrs. Scortino.
I just had a couple things to communicate to you. I gave each of you a green folder that has information regarding Capital Conference, which is this year beginning Sunday, November 13th through Tuesday, November 15th. Tomorrow, I'll just send out an email to you asking, you know, for you to respond if you plan to attend. And in the packet is just information about the conference. And one item that I wanted to point out is a page in there on special events. With registering all of you, there's also separate receptions that you can attend. One is the OSBA Black Caucus dinner, and then there's a Monday conference luncheon and a Tuesday conference luncheon, all of which have keynote speakers identified in your packet. So I will also need to know if you plan to attend any of those, as they are a separate cost as well. Okay?
Thank you.
And then finally, which kind of goes along with Finance Advisory Committee update, but we are scheduled for a meeting on Friday at noon via Zoom. Just at this point, we've only had 3 people RSVP that they plan to attend. However, it's Zoom, so anybody could jump on at any given time. But just wanted to remind you that we're scheduled for a meeting on Friday.
Thank you, Mrs. Scortino. Mr. Shiro, the presentation of the summer graduates.
Thank you, Mr. Fowley. At this time, I'd like to just take a brief moment to thank all of our family members that are here today that have been supportive to our graduates, whether it is a parent, a neighbor, a sibling, aunt, uncle, anyone that has made a significant influence and impact to support our 4 summer graduates. Summer graduation is very important for many, many ways, and we're very pleased to be able to have all of you here today to recognize you for your efforts. We are very proud of you, and we know it wasn't an easy road, but hopefully this will lead you onto bigger and better things along the way. At this time, I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Hartzell, who's our Chief Academic Officer, and the team at Warren G. Harding High School. Mrs. Hartzell.
Thank you, Mr. Shiro. Take a breath. You made it. On behalf of the staff, administration, superintendent, and the Board of Education, I want each of you to know how proud we are of you. People will tell you that this diploma that you're receiving during this August graduation is just as valuable as the diploma that was received by many of your peers in May. I'm going to tell you that it's much more valuable. Your commitment to persevere, to never quit, the grit and determination that you showed not to give up, but to work only until the end of the year, but beyond, to reach this point tonight, which is your high school graduation. These qualities are to be admired by others, and you should be very proud of finishing strong. Please keep in mind, this is not the end of your story, but this is only the beginning of the next part of your lives. Use this spark and motivation to drive the next steps of your life, to continue your success story, to make the future whatever you want it to be. Again, we are so proud of you, and congratulations, 2022 graduates. At this time, Mrs. Cambereri, would you please come up?
At this time, it is my pleasure, on behalf of Ms. Sandra Williams, principal of Warren G. Harding High School, it is my pleasure to present to the Warren City School Board of Education the members of the Warren G. Harding High School summer graduating class of 2022, who have successfully satisfied the graduation requirements as set forth by the state of Ohio and the Warren City School Board of Education. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Ulisny and the Warren G. Harding administration to acknowledge our graduates.
As we call your name, if you could please come forward and then greet the Warren G. Harding team. Honesty, Barry. Trinity Brooks. Zoe Plant. DeAndre Glover. At this time, we'll break for a brief reception. We do have some refreshments for the family. Thank you, and congratulations again, graduates. So proud of you.
think they were anticipating that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But we bought it. Yeah. Yeah.
Ready, Frank? Okay.
I could have shot you guys.
There's not a surface in that upstairs or downstairs.
Got it on my phone.
Except for
I didn't even think of it.
Yep.
we didn't touch
You accept the glass.
We've done something to every surface.
The board would like to thank the summer graduates and congratulate them on their achievement. We now need to move to the consent agenda, which is item 4 on page 17.
Why don't you gavel to bring the order?
We'll call the meeting back to order. Mrs. Doherty, the consent agenda, item 4 on page 17, which needs to be read in its entirety.
Reemployment of a retired employee. Whereas the board is desirous of reemploying Holly Simetz in the position of assistant principal following her system retirement on May 31st, 2022. And whereas the board has taken the necessary steps under Ohio RC 3307.353 to facilitate the employment of Ms. Simetz in retirement. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Ms. Simetz be reemployed as assistant principal for the 2022 to 2023, 2023 to 2024 contract years. The superintendent and treasurer shall assure the execution of all the documents necessary for the same. Be it further resolved that it is hereby found and determined that all the formal action of this board concerning and/or relating to the adoption of this resolution was taken in an open meeting of this board, and that all deliberations of this board and any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were in meetings open to the public and in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns from the other board members?
No.
Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion carries. Mr. Walker, you are excused.
Thank you.
And thank you for going back to your post as precinct judge to preserve our democracy.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Board of Education Committee reports. Athletics.
I have nothing major other than fall sports as they go. Our kids are all over campus. Bands setting campus week, so very lively campus this week. And we'll start some of our fall sports start next week.
Thank you. Mr. Walker is gone. Mrs. Lamperos, do you have anything?
What are we at? Under, oh, athletics. No, I don't have anything. Everything's great.
Thank you. Financial advisory, Mrs. Doherty.
Nope, just that we have our Zoom meeting on Friday.
Correct, and thank you. Board policies and guidelines.
No
Ms.
report.
Nothing for me.
Thank you. Legislative liaison.
Yes, I actually do have a very brief report. On Wednesday, the 20th of July, I attended via Zoom the Urban Network meeting from Columbus, which was very nice to be able to do that, not have to drive down there. I think it's a lot easier access for all of the districts since they hold the meeting in the middle of the day. So probably the biggest takeaway from the meeting is that the Urban Network is still working on a draft a piece of the alternative measures report, and that is basically the Urban Network's response to the state report card. So that is still in draft format, and there's still a lot of discussion forming that. Probably one of the biggest comments that I kind of took away was that one of the members of the Urban Network asked, what has the state report card ever done to help our communities? So I think that's really something to think about, the way that they are measuring data and whatnot. So the Urban Network is trying to come up with a formula that will be more reflective of all of the work that we do. So stay tuned.
If I can add to that, for the last 3 months, I've had on our scheduled superintendent's reports for Mrs. Hartzell as the Chief Academic Officer and Regina Toich as Director of Curriculum Instruction to present out on the state report card coming forth in September, and it's still all over the place.
Yes.
So right here I have report card August 2nd. Now I'm going to put August 30th, and it keeps getting moved because we want to provide the board the most accurate information in advance of the report card coming out. I think it's the 3rd week of September. It's scheduled thereabout. So if there's anything that you have as well, please feel welcome to share that. But we will be rolling out very shortly any information that our team has.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. TCTC, Liaison.
Our next meeting is next Thursday, and I'll be on vacation, so hopefully I'll have something come September.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing to the athletics?
Surely.
One of the items on the board agenda for this evening is a recommended change to the salary table where we're looking at the supervisor of aquatics. Coach Luco has indicated, been in discussion for several months, that he's no longer desiring to be the head coach, also of the swim team. He's also discussed, that he's done a lot of work with the pool and supervision therein, and we've worked with the athletic department. Through Athletic Council over the last several months, we've discussed this, and we've determined that we want to make an investment in swimming, in our swim program. The board made a commitment in investment in the facility many years ago. The community backed that through the LFI, and we felt that it was our job to recommend trying to create this position. It's intended to foster our youth swimming program. Currently, it was the 4th grade swim program. Due to the pandemic, it became the 5th grade swim program. We now need to catch up students. We're talking about making some recommendations, possibly having for 2 weeks at a lower grade, maybe 1 week in a 6th grade, something like that, to get students excited about our middle school swim program, and then start, working with, the Olympic Club, which, has always had a feeder program into ours, but also Trumbull, I think they were trying to, and I'm not sure if they got off the ground this year, a swim program, but trying to build the capacity of swimming in our community. Not just because it's a great sport for children, but it's also very important that children learn how to swim, especially children from a mid-sized urban environment like ours, because it does become a safety matter for many children. So that is the background of where we came with recommending a position, and especially with our Recreation and Wellness Center coming forth, we believe this would be consistent with the goals of what we want to do, with our children while we have them here in the Warren City Schools. So I know, Mr. Walker, Mrs. Lamperos was part of those discussions, the Athletic Council, Mr. Nicholson, Mr. Lacey, myself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any old business? I have something that's very old. The board did not approach lightly any retire-rehire consideration. There was a 5-0 vote tonight. When there's a need, we respond. And I just want to speak directly to Mr. Mauk on his 2nd day as union president. The last time this board did this, it was for a teacher. Any new business? We'll move on to the treasurer's recommendations. On page 3, item 1, Mrs. Lamperos.
Minutes. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding the July 2022 board minutes be approved as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion passes. On page 4, item 2, Mrs. Patterson.
22-23 co-curricular budget and purpose statements. It is recommended the resolution listed below establishing the 2022-23 co-curricular budget and purpose statements be approved as submitted.
Second?
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. On page 5, Mrs. Doherty, item 3.
Appropriation budgets. It is recommended the resolution listed below to approve the appropriation budgets A through I be approved as submitted.
Second.
Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 13,
No, 11.
on page what?
11.
Yeah, page 11.
Thank you. On page 11, item 4. Mrs. Patterson?
Approve the application, accept the grant, and approve the grant appropriations. It is recommended the resolution listed below to approve the application, accept the grant, and approve the grant appropriation, A, be approved as submitted.
Second?
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mrs. Doherty, on page 13, item 1.
Agreements, contracts, and/or leases. It is recommended the resolution listed below entering into agreements, contracts, and/or leases A through C be approved and as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. On page 15, item 2, Mrs. Lamperos.
Ohio Department of Education certification for Ohio Teachers Evaluation System and Ohio Principal Evaluation System. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding the Ohio Department of Education certification for credentialed Ohio Teachers Evaluation System and Ohio Principals Evaluation evaluators be approved as submitted.
Second?
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 16, item 3, Mrs. Patterson.
It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding field trip A through C be approved as submitted.
Second?
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 18, tuition reimbursement, Mrs. Doherty.
Tuition reimbursement. It is recommended the resolution listed below for tuition reimbursement be approved as submitted.
Second.
Questions or concerns? Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. Mrs. Lamperos, on page 19, item 6.
Revised salary table L, classified, non-supervisory, and grant-funded schedule. It is recommended the resolution listed below adopting changes to salary table L, classified, non-supervisory, and grant-funded schedule be approved as submitted with changes as recommended.
Second?
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 21, item 8.
No, 20.
Page 20.
Why are my pages sticking together? Thank you. On page 20, item 7, Mrs. Patterson.
Salary Table J, Classified Supervisory Salary Schedule. It is recommended the resolution listed below revising Salary Table J, Classified Supervisory Salary Schedule, be approved as submitted with changes as indicated.
Second?
Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion carries. On page 21, item 8. Mrs. Doherty.
Personnel recommendations. It is recommended the resolution listed below regarding personnel items A through M be approved as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, Mrs. Scortino, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes, and the motion carries. And that goes to page 32, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have no need of an executive session. At the conclusion of the meeting, there are no people registered to speak. I will accept a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Mrs. Scortino?
Mrs. Patterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Doherty?
Yes.
Mrs. Lamperos?
Yes.
Mr. Fowley?
Yes. The motion carries and the meeting ends at 10 minutes of 7.